I'm very excited on this edition of Isolation Interviews, and for Hospital Radio, my guest today is the very talented Sian Williams. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. What a great introduction. The very talented Sian Williams. I don't think that's ever been said in a sentence like that. I appreciate that, Matthew. Thank you.
Not a problem at all. Now, we must obviously first of all talk about the situation we find ourselves in with COVID-19 and the lockdown. How have you found the whole being stuck at home? I mean, obviously you're still able to work, but how have you found the whole situation?
Well, I've got two roles really. So at the moment I'm a newsreader for 5 News. So I'm broadcasting from our back bedroom. We fixed up a camera and an autocue and some lights, and I just operated all. I shut the door. Sometimes we have to put a mattress up against the door for extra soundproofing because my daughter's been doing gymnastics downstairs and you can hear her thumping. Got 2 kids at the moment with homeschooling. So obviously there's a lot of noise involved there. My husband's also working from home. So sometimes I think, I wonder whether this filters through to the 5 News viewers. But that's what we've been doing really now since April. We've been doing a live news program at 5 o'clock. For half an hour, and it can feel terrifying. I mean, I know that sounds ridiculous, bearing in mind what people are dealing with at the moment, but sometimes it feels very, very isolating because you are literally on your own. You're your own camera person, floor manager, makeup artist, I mean, everything. And if the Wi-Fi is a bit dodgy, which it can be because fantastic, I live in the country, but the broadband is not great, you can lose everything. So the autocue's gone down, or I lose contact with the gallery in London, with my director in London, so I don't even know whether I'm on air or not. So it's been really challenging, but I mean, the team have pulled it off. They've managed to do it. They set me up so I could do it, and yeah, and that's been brilliant. And then the other bit of my the stuff I do is I'm a psychologist. I'm just finished the 2nd year of a doctorate in psychology. So I have been doing a lot of voluntary counselling with young people at university and also with families, a lot of families who are really struggling and have got, dealing with a lot. And lockdown has can make situations a lot worse, a lot more intense. So I've been doing online therapy like this actually, in this room with people who are finding lockdown hard.
Now, I mean, I know there are a lot of people out there that are struggling, and mental health is such an important thing at the moment that we have to look after ourselves because it's so easy to go down the slippery slope of doing nothing, not getting not keeping routines. So I mean, it's so important just to look after yourselves.
Yeah, and just to stop and think, there is a great blurring at the moment, I think, of work and home for a lot of people. And, many people find home a kind of refuge and an escape, and it's like a sanctuary. And I think when you're in it all the time, and then when work comes into it as well, it's hard to manage. It can feel hard to manage. It can feel quite overwhelming. And with the worries that people have about whether they're going to hang on to their job, whether they're going to get COVID, managing their children. I mean, it's just, I think the pressures have been pretty intense. My son is a NHS doctor, and my brother is working in an NHS trust, and I've got quite a lot of my family work in the NHS, and they sort of tell me what it's like at the coalface. With physical health and dealing with the symptoms of coronavirus and the people who are really struggling. But I do think there's going to be this after effect in mental health, and I'm slightly concerned about what that's going to feel like and how people are going to manage that from having been stuck inside for so long and trying to deal with that isolation. If their mental health is already poor, it might exacerbate that. But also, what are the long-term effects of having COVID as well? So I think we really need to be prepared for looking after ourselves in in the weeks and months to come, even when it feels like the death toll is going down and it feels like the country's opening up, and we've got to almost look inside again and say, well, okay, how do I make myself more resilient, I guess? How do I build myself back up again, if that's what I need to do? How do I be a bit kinder to myself?
Yeah. Now, I imagine for yourself, obviously, you're working from home, but I mean, I imagine you're desperate to get back into the studio and do kind of your job as normal, or would you say you're quite, apart from obviously the broadband issues, are you quite enjoying the broadcasting from home?
I think it's quite hard to get that line between work and home when you're broadcasting from home and when your ear is always out for your children. And when you're at work, you're at work. Yeah, so there might be a phone call back home, but you're at work. Working from home has huge advantages. So I'm not commuting for 4 hours a day. That's fabulous. And being in this environment, where there are trees and it's sunny, and that is fabulous as well. So I'm very lucky in that respect. But there is just a different feel about being in a studio. I mean, there just is. Yeah. I don't know what it'll feel like, Matthew. If I'm perfectly honest, I don't know what it'll feel like to go back out there. I've been effectively shielding for quite a while. I had a breast cancer a few years ago, and I've missed a few appointments that I've meant to have gone to, like a lot of people, I think, in my situation. But yeah, I don't know what it's going to be like to go back out there. What is it like to be back out there? I haven't been to a pub. I haven't been out.
To be honest with you, I'm like you. I was shielding for a while. I'm now back at work, but I've not been to pubs or restaurants or anything like that. I've got no interest in going there until it all dies down. Beaches, no interest at all. I think for a lot of, this is personally my experience. I think for a lot of it is the fact that you've been shielding for a while. It's that kind of fear of the unknown, I think. I think once you get back out there and you start to kind of mingle with people, although from a safe distance, I think you do find that it gets easier. And I think it is a sort of a mental health, not necessarily a mental health thing, but it's sort of your mind is sort of thinking, oh, it's going to be awful, but it's not quite as bad as I think people maybe first think it's going to be. I think once you go outside and start mingling, it does get easier.
I think there are some people who are gagging to get back into a pub, and just to socialise and to be with people. And we have missed that a lot, haven't we? Because even in these Zoom calls, and it's lovely to get to know you and to have a chat and all that, but with the Zoom calls, when you're having meetings on the internet, you miss a lot of that social interaction that you get with physically being with someone. Sort of, just the eye contact, the body language, all the nuance, I guess, of social connection you miss. And I think that will be quite a nice thing to reconnect with. I certainly know that. I noticed that with therapy. There is a bit that you don't quite connect with online therapy because you're not there with the person. The connection isn't as intense. So I think that will be a nice thing to go back to. It's a bit like jumping into a really cold swimming pool, isn't it? You just think it's going to be great, but I just got to. Okay, yesterday. This is what I quoted to. Yesterday, my daughter, she's just finished primary school, and so for a treat, I took her on one of these high wire things. She's 11. One of these, where you swing from the trees and you jump on a net, and then it's fearsomely high. And she wanted to go on the adult one, of course she did, because she meets the height restriction. So we went on it, and there was one bit where you literally had to jump off a platform and swing and hope that you would attach yourself to this big wall of rope. And it feels a bit like that to me. It feels like I'm jumping off a really high platform, and I know I'm going to get to the rope, and I know I'm going to connect to it, and I know there's going to be a great feeling of, yeah, all right, then managed to get through, managed to do it. But it's just that initial, come on.
You've got to take the leap.
You've got to take the leap. Got to take the leap. We've all got to do it, haven't we?
Now, as a journalist, I imagine that when the coronavirus hit, there must have been two thought processes going on of, this is going to be a massive news story. We've got to cover it right. We've got to do the best we can. But then there's also the part of you that's thinking, but this is, you know, a story that is going to affect everyone, even, you know, yourself, my family. You know, it must be a weird story to report on, because you've got that personal connection to it, as well as obviously making sure it's you know, broadcast in the right way.
Yeah, I think it's unlike any story I've ever done in 35 years. And I think, yes, that personal pull, I guess, that personal connection, that, you know, you have a number of worries, don't you? All of a sudden you worry for the people who are close to you. So I worried for my dad, who's in his 80s. I worried for my son, who's going to hospital every day when the PPE was not there. I worried for my brother, who's also going to hospital every day. You worry for your family, your immediate family. Might they get it? What happens if they do? My son did get coronavirus, but he had it with he was tested when he went back into the NHS. He was asymptomatic. So, you know, some young people have had it, not experienced severe symptoms, but some have experienced severe symptoms. So you really, really don't know. It's such an unpredictable virus. You don't know how it's going to hit people. And I remember this weird time, and I turned to my husband. We were watching the news, and I'd done the news that night, but somehow sitting down and watching somebody else do it, and saying, you know what, it's 1,000 deaths a day. 1,000 deaths a day. I mean, that's just astonishing, isn't it? You have to kind of stop yourself and think, we were there. We were in that place where it was almost commonplace, day after day, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of deaths. I just think it's been extraordinary, because it's touched every aspect of our lives, hasn't it? Exactly. Every aspect of our lives. And I think we're all thinking differently, aren't we? It's like, okay, well, which bits of it do I never want to see again? Which bits of this, of what lockdown has been and what coronavirus has been, do I never want to see? And which bits of it actually had meaning that I might take with me, that I might go forward with? Like, for example, more connection with the family. You know, our family don't have my brothers, we don't normally have sort of weekly Zoom meetings. We don't normally weekly connect with each other like we have. And we have, and it's been really lovely. Little things like that you think, okay, more time with kids, more time with family. Pause, remembering to look around you. This is the sort of stuff I'll hang on to. But, you know, the rest of it can quite gladly go. But yeah, I guess as a journalist, it was nice when things started coming through that gave you some hope and optimism. It was nice when you could talk about the clapping that took place at 8 o'clock on a Thursday night. Apart from the fact it went out exactly the same time as my new Channel 5 series. And I was saying, no, don't watch me. Go out and clap. But yeah. So those little bursts of, little bursts of kindness, whether you see it on your street or whether you read about it in a newspaper, what people are doing to raise money or to just go the extra mile for others, that sort of thing just makes you think that is what humanity is, that is what this country is. And I think that's been a real eye-opener. So yeah, it's been a strange mix, hasn't it? Really strange mix of stuff. It's
been one of these things that, like you say, that there are, had someone said to us this time last year that next year you're going to be stuck indoors, or not going to be able to do things that you take for granted, going to the cinema, going to a pub, going to restaurants, hugging family members that you don't live with. If someone had said that to us a year ago, I think we would have laughed in their face and said, no, that's not going to happen. And then obviously it happens, and it just completely, it does knock you for six. And you just think, it just completely, everyone just found it so strange. And like you say, the deaths getting higher and higher. There were moments that, for example, when Boris Johnson ended up in hospital, I think that was a big wake-up call for everyone. Although whether you like him or not, it was still a moment that you went, oh my, this is really happening. This is happening in our country.
Yeah. And how have you been coping, Matthew? Where are you at the moment? Where am I? I'm looking at you in your front room, yeah?
So yeah, so I'm at home at the moment. I've been back at work now for a couple of months because I sort of my day job is not radio related. I actually work in self storage, which is not the most exciting job in the world. But I've been back. We've been not allowing people into stores. You know, there's sort of ways of kind of managing it. My family both work, or my parents both work in retail, so they're obviously my mum works on the checkouts at one of the supermarkets, and my dad's a delivery driver for another. So obviously, kind of for us, although life has kind of still continued on as normal-ish, although obviously things have been different in that everything takes a hell of a lot longer to get done. But for us, we haven't been too badly affected. But yeah,
And good for, can I just say as well, thank you to your mum and to your dad for doing the jobs they do, because I think another thing that we've noticed actually is how important and how valued those members of our community are who do those jobs, who deliver stuff to us, who keep the shops open. I think that's really important that we recognise that and we notice that.
Exactly. Now, I wanted to quickly go on to obviously how you got into journalism. How did you know that was where you wanted to take your career?
How did I know? Well, my dad was a journalist. He was a Fleet Street journalist, and I guess Radio 4 was on all the time. I was very conscious of news. There were a lot of newspapers in the house. He was always on the phone. And actually, I remember a bit of a feeling of dread when the phone went off, because I thought, right, they're going to take Dad away for some news story. But there was always this sense of something's happened, off he goes, and the excitement of it, I guess, and the adrenaline of it. And so I said to my dad, "Oh, this looks like a good job. I think I'd quite like to be a journalist." And my mum said, she was a nurse. She said, "Be a nurse, go into medicine, a lot more interesting." But I used to get quite squeamish. I am still quite squeamish. So I was the one that didn't go into the NHS. So I went into journalism. I applied for the BBC trainee scheme, and I applied for a newspaper trainee scheme as well. And I was very lucky to get both. So I chose the BBC one. And then I was at the BBC for 30 years, nearly 30 years. Yeah, long time. And it was great. My dad said, "Don't be a journalist and don't join the BBC."
I mean, would you say there was during your time at the BBC, there was a moment that you kind of felt really proud of, a story maybe that you covered that was a personal favourite, the way that you covered it?
I think one of the most meaningful ones in that I saw how important journalism could be was when I was in Liverpool. So I did local radio journalism for a long time, and I worked in Liverpool and during the Hillsborough disaster in 1989, and that was then I could really see how important local radio was to that city, and broadcasting the stories back to the people and hearing the voices, the voices of rage and horror and sadness, and I thought this is you've got a big responsibility here to tell these stories properly, it's like holding a really fragile vase almost when you've got somebody's story in your hand, and it's always about telling somebody's story well. And I guess I got my first glimpse of that when I went to covering Hillsborough. And then when I went down to London, I was being sent abroad quite a lot to disaster areas like the Pakistan earthquake and the Asian tsunami, and as well back at home, Paddington rail crash. And I was sent to a lot of disasters where you see people at their on their very, very worst day, or the very, very worst time of their lives. And that really made me, and actually that was one of the reasons for going into psychology, because I thought, if I'm hearing people's stories, I need to handle them well and make sure that I tell them in the way that they would like them to be told. And to do that, I need to understand the brain more. I need to understand them more. I need to understand what they're saying. So doing psychology at the same time as doing that kind of broadcasting was actually really helpful, because I think I was more aware of how fragile and vulnerable people could be, and how important and how responsible my role was. So I would say that sort of thing, you know, that's when you think journalism is really important, because you're handling something really, really precious.
And do you remember your first broadcast? Do you remember how you felt? Were you? I mean, I imagine there was nerves.
Yeah. In fact, I was on a radio station called Sussex Sounds, which I'm not even sure. It wasn't BBC Radio Sussex Sounds. And I've got a little cassette, but because I don't have a cassette recorder anymore, I can't play it. Actually, no, it was before that. Before that, I won a scholarship to the States to study journalism, and I was working on I got a job, because I had a British accent, news reading for the first time for RI 104. So I was, so I did that, and it felt really strange, because it felt like I could say anything. And, you know, when you've got that sort of slightly impish, I could say anything here. This is really dangerous. But also the excitement. I don't think I was broadcasting to anyone really on RI 104. But it felt quite special. And I thought, this is good fun. But I was a producer for years, so I wasn't a presenter really for quite some time. And I love the production. Production is just fabulous. Really, really good fun to make a program. So I was doing that. I was doing The World at 1 PM for a long time. But it was. It's always been fun, because every day is different.
And then I was going to say, when you eventually leave the BBC and go to Channel 5, that must have been a strange time, because you'd been at the BBC for 30 odd years, to then go to a completely different organisation. What was that like?
It was a bit of a breath of fresh air, and that's no disrespect to the BBC, who I absolutely love, and I'm very grateful for my time there. And everything I did there, and all the friends I've made there, which I'm still in contact with. You know, Bill, for example, and Steph, all those people, all the friends I made on Breakfast. But it was a bit of fresh air in that I learned something different, because working in a commercial environment is very different to working for the BBC, or was certainly at that time. And the Channel 5 newsroom is a lot smaller, so it has to be very fleet of foot. Something happens, they make a decision straight away, because they have to, because they only have they have a small team. And I think it always seems to punch above its weight with the team it's got. In very big organisations, it can feel a bit laborious to have decisions made. A story happens, and then perhaps it would go through, it's probably changed now, but it would, go through this person, that person, the other person, before anybody said, yeah, let's get on with it. Whereas at 5, it's just like, bang, something happened, get yourself out there. And there's something very liberating about that, I think. And it's because it's a small team as well, it feels like a little club of us who are all trying. Actually, it feels a lot like Breakfast, because Breakfast felt a bit like that. We didn't have very many resources, although we were part of the BBC. We're always sort of felt like occasionally we were quite way down the pecking order in terms of resources, and also where we were in how people thought of us in news terms. And that you develop a spirit if you're the underdog. And we were, when we started on Breakfast, or when I started on Breakfast, we were the underdog, because we had half the audience of ITV, and turning that around, it's like, let's go for it. And it just felt like we're such a tight team, and it feels like that a bit on 5. Really tight team, all trying to do the best job possible. It's good fun.
Now, I just want to say it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. But before we go, I just wanted to ask if there's any messages you'd like to give to any of the patients listening in hospital, or to anyone watching online.
To the patients listening in the hospital, I would say this too will pass. If that doesn't sound too mawkish, I know what it's like to be in hospital. I was in hospital earlier this year, and it's tough. I know it's tough, and especially under these circumstances, it must be even tougher. So I just want to say, stay strong, hold on to what works for you, be kind to yourself, and know that you can get through it. Know that you can get through it. And reach for the outstretched hands, you know, reach for the help that you need. Don't be afraid to ask for help. And I'd say to the staff, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. What an amazing job to turn up day after day and face what you're facing. I'm going to work for the NHS myself, actually, in September, as part of my final year's placement for the doctorate. So I'm really looking forward to working with the NHS staff and seeing the patients. And anyone who's listening, you know, we're nearly through it. We are nearly through it, and we will be stronger as a result when we come out the other side. And so hang on to what works.
Thank you so much, Sian. It's been an absolute pleasure. I must say, of course, keep safe. And yeah, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Matthew. All the very best to you as well. Good luck getting back out there.